The millionaire asked his neighbor for a child, but her secret changed his life forever. That afternoon was unusually quiet. A soft breeze swept through the rows of oak trees surrounding Emily Carter's aging cottage, carrying with it the scent of dried leaves and something like memory. She sat curled in a worn blanket on the porch, rereading an old novel she had loved since her teenage years. The pages were slightly yellowed, but the words still held their magic. Emily wasn't expecting anyone. She never did. Her life ran on a steady loop. Mornings at the secondhand bookstore she owned downtown. Afternoons with tea and books, then sleep. It was a quiet rhythm, a little lonely but safe, until the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, but in the silence it echoed like a declaration. Emily froze, glancing toward the weathered wooden gate that marked the edge of her property. And then she saw him. Nathan Bellamy, the wealthiest, most powerful man in town. CEO of a renowned tech company whose headquarters sat atop the hill overlooking the town, a place no one had ever been invited to. He was a passing blur on the local news or behind the tinted glass of a sleek SUV speeding through Main Street. Cold, distant, untouchable. And yet today he stood in front of her house, dressed in a charcoal coat, polished black shoes, and a stare that could pierce steel. Emily stood up, heart pounding in her chest. She placed the book on the wooden table and stepped off the porch. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," Nathan said. His voice was low, deliberate, crafted to command attention. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bellamy," she replied softly, caught off guard. "Can I help you with something?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze swept the small front yard littered with fallen leaves, then locked back onto her. "I need to speak with you. It's important." No explanations, no small talk, just that steady, icy tone. And something else, something barely visible beneath his polished demeanor. A crack. Emily hesitated, then gestured for him to join her on the porch. The wind lifted strands of her hair as she realized her quiet little life had just ended. Emily brewed 2 cups of tea, her hands slightly trembling as she placed them on the old wooden table on her porch. Nathan sat across from her, his posture upright, those sharp gray eyes watching her every move with unsettling calm. "Thank you," he said, though he made no move to touch the tea. "What was it you wanted to talk about?" "Something important," Emily asked, her voice soft but steady. Nathan placed both hands on his knees and took a deep breath. "I'll get straight to the point. I want to have a child." Emily frowned, unsure she'd heard him right. "I'm sorry." "What?" "A child. I want a child. Not because of love, not for marriage. I simply need a woman to carry a baby for me." His tone was businesslike, detached, as if he were discussing a merger, not human life. Emily froze. It wasn't the nature of the offer that shocked her, but the coldness in how it was delivered, as if she were a function, not a person. "Why me?" she asked, gripping the handle of her teacup for grounding. Nathan looked her directly in the eye. "You're the only person I believe can handle this with maturity. You live quietly. You're not tangled in town gossip. You keep to yourself. And," he paused, "you need the money." Heat rushed to Emily's face. It was true. Her finances were tight, but the way he laid it out, so bluntly, made her feel exposed. "I'm not some surrogate." "I didn't say you were." Nathan's response was immediate. "I don't want a stranger from a clinic. I want someone I can trust." Emily stood, her eyes flashing. "You think just because I live alone and work in a used bookstore, I'd be desperate enough to carry your child for a check? I think you're smart enough to recognize this is a serious proposal." He remained calm. "And I'm not offering just money. I'm offering financial stability, housing, insurance, education for the child. Everything." She turned away, heart pounding. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part was silently weighing the idea. "I can't decide this right now." "I don't expect you to." Nathan's voice softened just a touch. "Think it over. But if you agree, I want everything clear from the beginning. No emotions, just an agreement." Emily turned back to face him. "And what if something happens? What if we cross the line?" He paused, then shook his head. "I don't believe in love." The answer cut her, not deeply but precisely. And instead of fear, what she felt was pity. "Then I'll think about it," she said, her voice steadier. "But I want something clear too. If I say yes, you'll have to try. I'm not a vessel, I'm a person." For the first time, Nathan's gaze faltered. "I understand." When he walked away from her porch, Emily remained seated, hands wrapped around a now-cold cup of tea. Above her, gray clouds began to gather, signaling a storm not outside, but within the calm walls of her carefully guarded life. Emily didn't give an answer right away. After that strange conversation, she spent 3 sleepless nights replaying Nathan's proposal in her mind like a background score she couldn't mute. Part of her felt offended, part of her was curious, and deep down, deeper than she cared to admit, there was a part of her that felt seen. She called him 3 days later. "Can we meet again?" was all she said. Nathan agreed without asking why. This time they met at a small cafe Emily frequented. He arrived early, seated at a back table by the window, wearing a white shirt and a dark knit coat. He looked more human. "Have you decided?" he asked when she sat down. "Not really," Emily exhaled, her eyes drifting to the window. "I'm not just thinking about the money. I'm thinking about the consequences." Nathan nodded, offering no defense. "I've been rethinking things too." She turned to him, surprised. "What part?" "Whether I'm ready for a child and for someone to stay." He spoke slowly, like each word had been carefully considered. They didn't talk about the agreement that day. Instead, they talked about little things. Emily's bookstore, Nathan's favorite childhood book, the reason he moved to this town. He'd grown up in the foster system. That explained a lot. From that day on, they saw each other more. Not on a schedule, but when it felt right. Some days he stopped by her bookstore with coffee. Other days she sent him books with handwritten notes. Page 137, read carefully. Emily wasn't sure what was happening, but she was certain of one thing. Nathan was no longer just a man of contracts and terms. He started laughing, awkwardly but genuinely. He asked about her childhood, listened without interrupting, and sometimes he looked at her like he was trying to understand an entirely new language. Slowly, Emily began to see the man behind Nathan's cold exterior. He wasn't the kind of man who opened up easily, but around her, his silences felt different. Not withdrawn, but attentive. He remembered the little things. How she liked 2 spoonfuls of honey in her tea, the song she played every time she closed the shop, the way her eyes grew distant when reading something sad. One day it rained hard. Nathan showed up at the bookstore, coat soaked, holding a bag of warm pastries. He simply said, "I figured you skipped lunch today." She didn't know how he knew, but in that moment, her heart wavered. He could still be stubborn, rational, and brutally direct. But beneath all that was a man learning to care, in the clumsiest, most sincere way. That night didn't begin as anything special. They were at her place and sitting on the couch, watching an old movie. Something on screen made her laugh, and he just looked at her for a long time. She turned, their eyes met. No dialogue, no justification. When their lips touched, it wasn't a promise. It wasn't a step in the contract. It was surrender to something so real. Neither of them could ignore it anymore. They made love in quiet understanding. No rush, no agenda. Just 2 people, finally allowing themselves to be seen and to be touched without wearing any armor. The next morning, Nathan left early, a folded note resting beside her teacup. "Call me when you're ready. I'll be waiting." Emily pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, something like hope bloomed inside her. But sometimes the past doesn't let you move forward so easily. 2 days later, Emily was cleaning out the small attic behind her house, the space where she stored old things from her teenage years. She told herself it was time to make room for new beginnings. But when she pulled a heavy, dust-covered box from the corner, the life she thought she was building began to crumble. Inside were old documents she never expected to see again. Hospital files, school forms from when she was 16. And then, a pale yellow envelope, slightly wrinkled, sealed tight. The top right corner still bore the stamp of the private hospital from the city where she had once stayed hidden. At the darkest point of her life, her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were 2 papers. One was a birth certificate. The name hit her like a blow to the chest. Liam Carter. Her last name. Date of birth, 15 years ago, in autumn. The second was an adoption record. Emily read every line, the world collapsing around her with each word. And then, she saw the adoptive parent's name, Nathan Bellamy. No, this couldn't be coincidence. Her vision blurred. The papers slipped from her hands onto the floor. The air in the attic thickened until it was hard to breathe. She backed away, collapsing onto her knees, her mind reeling. Liam, the baby she had carried, delivered, and was forced to let go before she even held him properly, was Liam Bellamy, Nathan's son, her son. And now she was carrying another child, with the man who raised the one she had lost. A circle too perfect, too cruel. Emily clutched her head, tears falling freely. She had lived for so long with an emptiness she couldn't name, not knowing that the missing piece had always been nearby, just out of reach. Now she knew, but Nathan didn't. Would he believe her? Would he think she had hidden it on purpose? She didn't. She swore she didn't. But would that even matter? The faded birth certificate stared up at her like an accusation. She grabbed it with shaking fingers, as if she could crush the truth, crush the ache inside her chest. In that moment, she knew. Everything had changed. It was no longer a contract, no longer a budding romance. It was the survival of a secret powerful enough to destroy them all. Emily dropped to her knees. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her, as if the past had circled back with a blade in its hand. She sat for hours in the attic, the papers scattered around her like fragments of a memory she had tried to bury. She stared at the name Nathan Bellamy, each letter searing into her chest. She wanted to run to him right then, to grab his hand and tell him she didn't know, that it was all a coincidence, so cruel it bordered on fate. But then she remembered his eyes, cold, sharp as glass, when he once said he couldn't stand being lied to. She knew, when this truth came out, it wouldn't just threaten whatever they had. It would tear apart the most fragile thing of all, trust, and worse, it could shatter the heart of a boy named Liam. Emily wiped her tears and gathered the documents into another envelope. She had no idea where to begin, but she knew if she stayed silent, she'd lose everything. That evening, she called Nathan. When he answered, she said only 4 words. "We need to talk." Nathan arrived late in the afternoon, punctual as always. Emily opened the door, standing like someone awaiting a sentence she already knew. He stepped inside, gray eyes scanning her with a precision that cut deeper than words. No smile, no warmth, just silence. She offered him a seat. There was no tea, no pastries, only an envelope on the table, her pale hands clutching it like it held her soul. "I found this," Emily began, her voice dry. "It's about Liam." Nathan frowned, confused. She slid the envelope toward him. He opened it. A birth certificate, an adoption file. Suddenly, the room felt much smaller. Nathan read in silence. Each line hardened his face, darkened his gaze. He looked up. "Is this real?" Emily nodded, tears already threatening. "I didn't know. Not until 2 days ago. I gave birth to Liam. I was 16. I was forced to give him up. I had no idea you were the one who adopted him." Nathan stood abruptly, his eyes sharp as blades. "And you thought telling me this now, after everything, that was acceptable?" "I didn't keep it from you on purpose. I swear." "Then why didn't you say something the moment you found out?" he snapped. "Because I was scared," she cried. "Scared you wouldn't believe me? That you'd think I was manipulating you. I was scared of losing you. I've never had anyone to lose. Until you." Nathan went silent. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "You said you loved me, and yet you kept from me the one thing that matters most. About my son. About your son." They stared at each other, 2 strangers amid the wreckage of something neither of them meant to destroy. "I just wanted to be close to him," Emily whispered. "Not to take him away, just to be near, to try again." No one gets to try again, Emily." His voice cracked, trembling not just with rage, but something closer to heartbreak. "Some mistakes come with a price, and you just made everything feel like a lie." She stepped toward him, but he backed away. "Nathan, don't say my name." He turned from her, eyes burning. I don't know who you are anymore. He left, the door slamming shut behind him like a verdict. Emily stood there in the growing dark, her hands still reaching for the space where he had been. Her heart fell into a depth so cold, she wasn't sure it would ever climb out. She had lost Liam once. Now she had lost Nathan too. A week had passed since Nathan walked away. Emily hadn't heard from him. No calls, no messages, just silence. But she couldn't wait any longer. There was someone else who deserved the truth. Someone more important than anyone else. That afternoon, Emily stood at the gates of Nathan's estate, the place she once considered forbidden. But this time, she wasn't here for him. The door was answered by the housekeeper. Emily politely explained that she wished to speak with Liam. Surprisingly, the woman nodded, hesitant, then let her in. Liam was in the backyard. He sat alone wearing headphones, fidgeting with a model airplane on the stone table. The golden light of sunset fell across his shoulders, casting his light brown hair in copper tones. Emily walked slowly toward him, heart pounding like a drum. She had no idea how to begin. Hi there, she said softly. Liam looked up, frowning, pulling off his headphones. Who are you? I'm Emily, she said, steadying herself. I just want to talk, if that's okay with you. Liam stared at her, that wary look, so familiar in children who had been hurt. But then, slowly, he nodded. They sat across from each other, a small distance, but it felt like an ocean. Emily didn't dive into it. She asked about his plane, his school, the books he liked. Liam answered, short, clipped replies, but he didn't leave. After a while, Emily fell silent. She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, I know you probably don't understand why I'm here, but I owe you the truth. Liam looked up, his eyes sharp. I'm your biological mother, Liam. Silence. The wind rustled through the lavender bushes nearby. He didn't move. Then slowly he stood up. So, what do you want? His voice wasn't angry, but it was heavy. To take me back? To say sorry? Or just to feel better? Emily clenched her hands. No, I don't want to take anything. I just want to know you, even a little, if you'd let me. Liam stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. Emily stayed seated, her heart clenched tight. But she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you for not walking away right away. He didn't speak, didn't hug her, didn't call her anything, but he had stayed and listened. And for her, that was a beginning. Nathan wasn't home that afternoon. He didn't know Emily had come. He didn't know what she had said to Liam until he opened the backyard security footage. At first, he only intended to glance at it, but once the image appeared, Emily standing there, shoulders trembling slightly, trying to stay calm in front of Liam, he couldn't look away. He watched it once, then again, and again, not to scrutinize, but because in the quiet of that recording, he saw what his anger had hidden all week, a mother, a real one. And for the first time, his hardened gaze softened, not in pity, but in understanding. Emily hadn't come to reclaim her son. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't demand. She simply asked if Liam would let her know him, even just a little. Nathan sat in silence for hours afterward, in his study. Beside him lay the old envelope, the birth certificate, the adoption papers. What had once felt like a blade now beat with something deeper, truth. And Nathan finally understood. Some wounds, if kept buried and covered in silence, only rot from within. Only truth, however painful, can begin the healing. The next morning, when Emily unlocked her bookstore, Nathan was already there. She froze, keys still in hand, her heart skipping a beat. We need to talk, he said, repeating the exact words she had once used with him. They sat down, not on a porch, not in a kitchen, but among shelves lined with old books, where the air smelled of dust and memory. I saw the footage, Nathan began, his voice low and steady. You didn't ask for anything. You just told the truth. Emily didn't reply. She met his eyes full of unspoken things, I thought I was angry because you hid it, he continued. But the truth is, what hurt more was that I didn't give you the chance to explain. And I saw that in the way you spoke to Liam. He paused, swallowing something heavy. Liam is everything to me. I've lost too much in my life, and I've held on to him like he's a part of my soul. And when you came with the truth, I thought I was about to lose him. Emily whispered, "You didn't lose anything. I didn't come to take. I only wanted to be near him." Nathan nodded slowly, lifting his gaze. For the first time, his eyes softened. "I believe you, but you need to hear this. If you hurt him again, even unintentionally, I won't be able to forgive you." "I understand," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I won't. I couldn't." He studied her for a long moment, and in that silence, something inside him shifted. Not everything, but something. Then he said gently, "Go slow. Don't push. Let it happen on its own. If you truly want to be a mother, walk that path with patience and truth." Emily nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. And in that quiet, time-worn bookstore, between two people broken in different ways, a new breath of something fragile but real began to stir. 2 days later, Nathan returned to the bookstore, unannounced. Emily was rearranging old books on a shelf. When she looked up and saw him standing at the doorway, the light pouring over his shoulders, she instinctively held her breath. "I'm not here to talk about arrangements," Nathan began, walking slowly toward her. "Today, it's about you, about me, about us." Emily nodded softly but stayed quiet. They sat at the small table by the window. That spot always seemed warmer in the late afternoon light, gentler, as if time itself lingered there just a bit longer. Nathan clasped his hands together. "I used to think I only needed a child, someone to carry on the name, to inherit the legacy." He paused, then looked her in the eyes. "But when you came into my life, when I saw you with Liam, I realized I was wrong." Emily let out a breath, like she was finally releasing a hope she had been holding in silence. "I want a family, not a perfect one, just real, with you, with Liam, and maybe with what's coming next." He glanced toward her stomach instinctively, then looked away as if afraid of being too hopeful. Emily's eyes softened. She looked at him for a long moment, then finally spoke, this time from the deepest place in her heart. "I agreed to your proposal, not because of the money, but because something about you made me feel safe, not the comfortable kind, but the quiet, steady kind, the kind I've never known." Nathan didn't reply right away. He simply reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. The touch was gentle, not rushed, not demanding, just present. "So, shall we start again?" he asked, eyes never leaving hers. Emily smiled through teary eyes. "From the beginning, or from where we left off?" "From where we lost our way," he said. Outside the window, the sunset dipped low, casting soft gold across the stacks of books by the door. And in that moment, there were no more conditions, no more contracts, only two people, scarred and softened by life, finally brave enough to hold on, for real. Since that afternoon, things didn't change overnight, but something shifted. There were no more tense conversations, no more guarded stares. Instead, silence became softer. The kind that existed when three people simply shared the same space, each doing their own thing, yet undeniably present. Emily didn't try too hard with Liam. She didn't call him son, didn't force conversations. She was just there, with a cookie, a cup of tea, or a gentle offer. "Want to help me fold these pages?" At first, Liam would shake his head. Then slowly he started to nod. There weren't always smiles, but his eyes stopped avoiding hers. One quiet afternoon, while rain tapped gently on the glass roof of the garden room, Liam sat flipping through an astronomy book. Emily was nearby, not intruding, just present. Suddenly, Liam spoke. "Miss Emily." "Yes." "Mom." Her hands froze. Her heart stretched wide in that invisible, breathless moment. She looked at him. He didn't meet her gaze, just kept reading. But he had said it, and for her, that was everything. They didn't talk about the past. Liam never called her mom again, but Emily didn't need it. once was enough to warm her heart for days. One crisp winter morning, Nathan invited her for a walk through the woods just outside town. The trees were bare, the ground a blanket of faded brown leaves. The air was cold, but not biting, like their hearts, scarred, but no longer bleeding. "I used to think all I needed was a child," Nathan said, hands tucked deep into his coat pockets. "Someone to carry the name." Emily stayed quiet, letting him speak. "But then you came, and Liam called you Mom, and I realized, I don't want an heir. I want a family." She stood still. A breeze moved gently through her hair. "I've lost so much," he continued, "and I was afraid of losing again. But you, despite the truth, the chaos, you were the only thing that made me feel at peace." He stopped under a familiar old oak tree. Slowly, he pulled out a small box. Nothing flashy, just something honest. No conditions, no contracts, just me, wanting to build something with you, if you'll let me. He knelt, eyes steady. "Emily Carter, will you marry me?" She didn't answer right away. One tear slipped down, then she stepped forward and took his hand, gently but firmly. "Yes," she whispered, "not out of obligation, not because I feel I should, but because I love you, and because this, us, is a family." Nathan rose and pulled her into his arms, and in that quiet forest, with no audience but the trees, they finally had everything they needed. For the first time in her life, Emily didn't feel alone. The church sat quietly on a hill north of town, where the sun rose early and the wind always whispered. It wasn't a place for grand weddings, just an old wooden chapel with gray shingles, white stone walls, and long-worn pews. But for Emily, it was perfect. Not for running, not out of obligation, but because she was chosen, and because she chose in return. The guest list was small, a few familiar neighbors, the local florist, Liam's old school teacher, and the elderly pastor who often read books at Emily's shop on Monday mornings. Emily stood in a small room behind the chapel, adjusting her dress. It was simple. Long-sleeved, ivory linen, with no lace or sparkle, just a soft ribbon tied at the waist. A gentle knock came at the door. She turned. Liam stood there in a gray suit slightly too big, his brown hair slicked down awkwardly. "Ready?" she asked, her smile trembling. He stepped forward, holding out his hand. "I think I'm supposed to walk you down the aisle, right?" She couldn't speak. She just nodded, pressing her lips together as she took his hand. Small but strong. The chapel doors opened. Light spilled in across the aisle, painting a soft golden path leading to where Nathan stood in a simple black suit, eyes fixed only on her. Each step Emily took felt like walking home, towards something she never believed could be hers, a place to belong, a family, a future. Their vows weren't long, not poetic or dramatic, just honest, like how they'd learned to love, little by little, through scars, through forgiveness. When the pastor asked if she'd stay in sunshine and in storm, Emily gripped Nathan's hand tighter and nodded, eyes glistening. Then quietly she placed her hand over her stomach, a small gesture, but one that made Nathan pause. He looked at her and she smiled, as if to say, "This isn't just a new beginning, it's a whole new chapter." After the ceremony, there was no grand reception, no champagne, no string quartet, just a small meal outside the chapel, wooden tables, wildflowers in mason jars, and the golden light of late afternoon brushing everyone's shoulders. Liam stood between them. At one point, when no one was watching, he squeezed Emily's hand and whispered, "I think you're going to be a good mom." She turned to him, stunned and overwhelmed. He didn't look back, just lowered his gaze. But she understood, and she held his hand tightly. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Emily, Nathan, and Liam walked out to the field behind the chapel. They didn't speak. They simply wrapped their arms around one another. No speeches, no promises. Just three people, once broken, now whole, finally standing side by side. The light wrapped around them like a soft blanket, and if someone were passing by, they'd only see three people holding each other at sunset. But to them, it was everything. Because in the end, it's never too late. to love, to forgive, and to come home. In the quiet after everything, they learn that love doesn't always arrive loudly. It sometimes whispers, waits, forgives, and stays. And in each other's arms, beneath the fading light, they finally found not just home, but the peace of truly belonging.